Understand this before anything else. The life you are living right now, in this exact moment, is not happening to you. It is happening through you, from a state of consciousness you have accepted as true. Every circumstance surrounding you, every relationship, every dollar in your account, every door that has opened or closed is simply the outer picture of an inner assumption you have been unconsciously carrying. And once you understand this, truly understand it, not just as an idea, but as a living truth, everything changes. Nothing outside of you has any power except the power your own consciousness gives it. This is not poetry. This is law. Think about this for a moment. If your outer world is nothing more than a reflection of your inner world, then the only work worth doing is inner work. Not striving, not forcing, not chasing, inner work. Because the moment your inner state shifts, your outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself to match. This is what the ancient teachers meant when they spoke of the kingdom of God being within you. They were not describing a place you go to after death. They were describing a state of consciousness you can enter right now, today, in this very breath. The kingdom is not somewhere else. The kingdom is your own awareness, and everything you could ever want already exists there, fully formed, fully complete, waiting only for you to accept it as your own. Let that sink into your spirit for a moment, waiting only for you to accept it as your own, not to work for it in the way the world teaches work, not to struggle, not to prove yourself worthy, not to earn your way into deserving it, simply to accept it, because acceptance is not passive. Acceptance is the most powerful act a human being can perform. To accept something inwardly, to feel it as true, to live from it rather than toward it, is to set into motion forces that no amount of external effort could ever match. This is the secret hidden in plain sight throughout every sacred text, every wisdom tradition, every mystical teaching that has ever tried to describe the mechanics of reality. You must become, in your imagination and your feeling, the person who already has what you desire before that thing can ever appear in your experience. This is what it means to act as if you already have everything. Not to pretend in a hollow, superficial way, not to fake a smile while your heart quietly disbelieves, but to genuinely, completely shift your inner identity so that lack no longer exists in your consciousness, because you have already claimed the fullness of what you desire as a present fact of your being. The world calls this delusion. The wise call this faith. And faith, understood correctly, is not believing in something you cannot see. Faith is knowing something so deeply that you no longer need external proof, because you have already experienced it internally in the only place where reality is actually created. Consider this for a moment. What does it truly mean to have something? Ownership, in its deepest sense, is not a legal document or a bank balance. Ownership begins as a state of consciousness. Before a man builds a house, he must first see it complete in his mind. Before a woman starts a business, she must first feel herself as the founder, the leader, the one who has already succeeded, long before the world offers any evidence to support that feeling. The outer manifestation is always the last step, not the first. The world teaches you to believe only what you can see, touch, and measure, but this is backwards. You do not believe because you see. You see because you believed first, somewhere in the quiet, unseen chambers of your own imagination. This is why so many people struggle to manifest the life they desire. They wait for outer proof before they allow themselves to feel the inner reality. They say, when I have the money, I will feel abundant. When I find the relationship, I will feel loved. When I get the promotion, I will feel confident. But this is living in reverse. This is asking effect to produce cause. The truth, the eternal truth that never changes regardless of century or culture, is that feeling comes first. Feeling creates the vibration, the frequency, the inner climate from which all outer conditions must eventually spring. If you wait to feel wealthy until you see money, you will wait a very long time, because the money is waiting on you to first feel wealthy. Notice what happens when you flip this order. Notice what happens when, instead of asking the world for evidence, you decide right now in this very moment to feel as the person who already possesses what you desire. Something shifts inside your chest. Your posture changes. Your breathing slows. A quiet confidence settles into your bones that has nothing to do with your bank statement or your relationship status or your job title. This feeling, this new inner posture, is the beginning of every true transformation. It is the moment you stop being a beggar at the door of life and become, instead, a sovereign standing fully within your own kingdom. You are not your circumstances. Let that truth settle into every cell of your body. You are not the debt. You are not the diagnosis. You are not the rejection, the loneliness, the years that seem to have passed you by. These are simply temporary expressions of a past assumption, a story you once accepted as true, perhaps without ever choosing it consciously. But here is the astonishing, liberating truth. You can choose again. You are not chained to yesterday's identity. Every single moment offers you a fresh opportunity to assume a new state, a new self-concept, a new inner reality from which an entirely different life can emerge. The Bible speaks of this again and again, though most read these words only as ancient history rather than living psychological instruction. When it says, calling those things that be not as though they were, it is not describing wishful thinking. It is describing the actual mechanism by which imagination becomes flesh. To call a thing that is not yet visible as though it already exists, to speak of it, think of it, feel it, live from it as a present reality, is to plant a seed so deep into the soil of your subconscious mind that it must, by law, eventually break through the surface of your outer experience. This is not mysticism divorced from reason. This is the deepest reason of all, hidden from those who only look outward for their answers. The truth is, most people spend their entire lives observing their current conditions and calling that observation reality. They see their empty bank account and declare, I am broke. They see their empty side of the bed and declare, I am alone. They see their tired reflection in the mirror and declare, I am stuck. But understand this. Observation is not truth. Observation is simply a photograph of a past assumption that has not yet caught up with a new one. If you keep observing the old picture and calling it truth, you will keep feeding that old picture with your attention, your emotion, and your belief, and it will continue to reproduce itself indefinitely. This is why some people seem to live the exact same year over and over, dressed in different dates. Nothing changes internally, so nothing can change externally. Let this settle within you now. To act as if you have everything is to stop being a reporter of your current conditions and to become instead the author of your next chapter. It is to close your eyes and for a few sacred minutes each day, step fully into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not thinking about it from a distance as an observer hoping it might happen someday, but living inside it, feeling the textures of it, hearing the sounds that would surround you if it were already true, sensing the exact quality of relief, joy, and gratitude that would naturally accompany its fulfillment. This is not childish fantasy. This is the most disciplined, most powerful spiritual practice available to any human being, because you are literally using the creative power that was given to you in the beginning. The same power referred to when it was said that you were made in the image and likeness of the Creator. Not a physical image, a creative one. The power to imagine, and by imagining, to bring forth. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the home you have always desired. Feel the floor beneath your feet. Notice the light coming through the windows. Hear the quiet hum of a life that feels complete, unhurried, abundant. Do not simply look at this scene as a spectator. Step inside it. Let your senses fully engage. Feel the natural, quiet confidence of someone who belongs there, because you do belong there in truth right now, in the only place reality is ever actually assembled, which is your own consciousness. This is what it means to act as if, not performance for others. Private, sacred, internal residence in the state of the wish fulfilled. You must realize that the subconscious mind does not distinguish between an event vividly imagined with feeling and one actually experienced in the physical world. This is not metaphor. This is documented, repeated, observable truth. The subconscious accepts as real whatever is impressed upon it with sufficient feeling and repetition, and once it accepts something as real, it must begin arranging outer circumstances, people, opportunities, and events to bring that inner reality into physical form. This is why the discipline of daily imagination done with real feeling rather than idle daydreaming is so much more powerful than mere positive thinking. Positive thinking often stays on the surface, a mental affirmation without emotional conviction. But feeling, true feeling, reaches down into the subconscious soil where actual growth begins. This is why you must feel it now, not later. Feel this deeply. The moment you postpone the feeling of having, waiting instead for outer proof, you unconsciously reinforce the belief that you do not yet have it. And whatever you believe with feeling, you will experience. So the question becomes, are you willing to feel the reality of your desire now before any evidence appears, simply because you understand the law that governs all creation? This is the leap that separates those who manifest consciously from those who drift through life at the mercy of accidental, often fearful imagination. Fear, after all, is simply imagination used in reverse, vividly picturing what you do not want and feeling it as though it were already true. The same law that can build your dream life is the same law that, misused, builds your nightmares. It does not judge, it only responds to the feeling you impress upon it. Understand this: the universe, God, consciousness, whatever word feels true to your own heart, does not ask you to prove your desire is realistic. It only asks whether you can feel it as real within yourself. This is why children so easily manifest wonder, joy, and play before the world teaches them the heavy weight of doubt. A child does not ask whether becoming a superhero is statistically probable. A child simply feels it, plays it, lives inside the feeling completely, and for those golden, uncorrupted years, that feeling shapes their entire experience of reality. Somewhere along the way, most adults are taught to abandon this power in favor of so-called realism, which is really nothing more than agreement with current temporary appearances. But you were never meant to simply agree with appearances. You were meant to transform them. Allow yourself to see this clearly. Every great achievement in human history began as an assumption held firmly in someone's imagination long before it existed anywhere else. The airplane existed in the felt conviction of inventors long before it left the ground. The technology now sitting in your pocket existed as a vivid, emotionally charged assumption inside the mind of its creators years before the first working model was built. These were not lucky accidents. They were demonstrations of a law as consistent and as impartial as gravity. Assumption held with feeling and persistence hardens into fact. This law does not care whether you use it consciously or unconsciously. It only cares that you use it because you cannot not use it. You are always assuming something about yourself, about your life, about what you deserve, and what remains out of reach. The only true choice available to you is which assumption you will hold. So the real question becomes, what have you been assuming about your own life quietly, perhaps without ever examining it directly? What have you accepted as simply the way things are for you? Consider this: if you have accepted a self-concept of struggle, of being the one who always almost makes it but never quite arrives, of being unlucky in love, of being someone for whom money is always tight, then you have, without realizing it, been faithfully practicing the very technique described in every sacred teaching on manifestation, except you have been aiming it unconsciously at what you do not want. The power was never absent from your life. It was simply pointed in a direction you did not consciously choose. This is why self-concept sits at the very center of all lasting transformation. It is not enough to affirm wealth while secretly seeing yourself as someone who struggles with money. It is not enough to affirm love while secretly believing yourself unworthy of being chosen. The subconscious mind will always honor the deeper, more habitually felt identity over the surface level affirmation. This is why some people repeat positive statements for years with little visible change, because underneath the words, the actual felt identity has remained untouched. True transformation requires you to go beneath the words, into the quiet architecture of your self-concept, and gently, patiently, persistently replace the old identity with a new one, felt as real, lived from as true, defended against contrary evidence with the same loyalty you would give to any fact you consider unquestionable. Feel this deeply. You are not being asked to lie to yourself. You are being asked to remember something you forgot. Somewhere beneath the noise of your current circumstances, there exists a version of you that has already lived the life you are dreaming of. This is not fantasy. This is the deeper structure of consciousness itself, which contains within it every possible state, every possible version of your becoming, waiting only for your attention and your feeling to draw it into visible form. When you imagine your desire fulfilled and feel it is true, you are not creating something from nothing. You are choosing which already existing state of consciousness you will inhabit, and therefore which version of reality you will experience. This is why the wisest teachers never spoke of manifestation as creation from emptiness. They spoke of it as choosing, as awakening, as remembering, as coming home to a truth that was always available, simply unclaimed. Let this settle within you now, slowly, without rushing past it. The life you desire is not far away, waiting to be built brick by brick through years of struggle. It exists now, complete in the timeless dimension of your own consciousness, and your only task is to shift your attention, your feeling, your identity, until you are living from that place rather than merely hoping to arrive there someday. This shift does not happen through force. It happens through relaxed, persistent, faithful occupation of the new state. Each night before sleep, when the analytical mind grows quiet and the subconscious becomes most receptive, you have a sacred opportunity to step into the feeling of your fulfilled desire and to fall asleep inside that feeling, allowing it to sink undisturbed into the depths of your being, where it will continue working long after your conscious mind has released its grip for the night. This is why the state you fall asleep in matters so profoundly. Whatever feeling you carry into sleep is like a seed planted in the most fertile soil available to the human mind, undisturbed by the noise and distraction of waking life, free to take root and grow throughout the night. If you fall asleep in worry, you plant worry. If you fall asleep in resentment, you plant resentment. But if you fall asleep in the calm, quiet certainty of having already received what you desire, feeling gratitude as though the answer has already arrived, you plant the seed of your own transformation in the very hour when it has the greatest chance to flourish undisturbed. This is not a technique invented recently. This is ancient wisdom, rediscovered again and again throughout history by those willing to look beyond appearances into the actual mechanics of creation. You must realize that acting as if you have everything is not about denying your current circumstances exist. It is about refusing to grant those circumstances the final authority over your identity and your future. You can acknowledge the bank balance without accepting it as a permanent verdict on your worth or your potential. You can acknowledge the empty chair across the table without accepting loneliness as your unchangeable destiny. This is the difference between facts and truth. A fact is simply what currently appears to be so. Truth is what you know, deep within, to be eternally so, regardless of appearances. The wise learn to live from truth while remaining fully aware of, but not enslaved by temporary facts. This is not denial. This is spiritual sovereignty. Think about this for a moment. What would change in your daily life starting today if you truly believed, without any lingering doubt, that everything you desire already belongs to you in consciousness and is simply waiting for your inner alignment to bring it into visible form? You would stop begging. You would stop chasing. You would stop that exhausting, anxious grasping that so often pushes away the very things you long for. Because desperation itself is simply the feeling of lack magnified and projected outward. And whatever feeling you project outward, the outer world faithfully mirrors back to you. When you release the desperate grasping and instead settle into the calm, quiet knowing of one who already possesses, you create an entirely different emotional atmosphere, one that naturally attracts rather than repels the very circumstances you desire. This is why so many people notice that the moment they finally stop desperately searching for something, it seems to arrive almost effortlessly. This is not coincidence. It is the direct result of an inner shift from lack to fulfillment, from grasping to receiving, from begging to already having. The outer world simply cannot help but rearrange itself to match the inner state you occupy most consistently. This is the deepest secret behind what looks from the outside like luck or good timing. It is neither luck nor timing. It is consciousness quietly and faithfully doing what consciousness always does, producing an outer experience that matches the inner state being held. Consider this. If this law is truly as consistent and impartial as gravity, then your task is not to convince the universe to give you something. Your task is simply to align your inner state with the state of already having received it. This reframes your entire relationship with desire. You are no longer petitioning some distant external power to grant you a favor you may or may not deserve. You are recognizing your own creative authority given to you from the very beginning and using it deliberately, consciously, and with full acceptance of responsibility rather than unconsciously, as most of humanity has done throughout history, often producing outcomes they never intended because they never realized they were creating at all. The truth is, you have been creating your entire life, whether you knew it or not. Every relationship, every financial season, every physical condition, every professional outcome has been shaped by the assumptions you carried, consciously or unconsciously, about yourself and your possibilities. This is not meant to bring guilt. Guilt is simply another heavy assumption that, if adopted, will produce more of what you are trying to escape. This is meant to bring you freedom, because if you have been unconsciously creating your current reality, then you can just as easily and far more powerfully begin consciously creating a new one. The same power that built the life you may currently wish to change is available right now, in this very moment, to build a life you actually desire. Let that truth settle into your spirit. You are not powerless. You have never been powerless. You may have felt powerless because you were looking for your power in the wrong place, searching the outer world for permission, for validation, for proof, when the entire time the power was operating quietly within your own imagination, waiting patiently for you to notice it, claim it, and direct it with intention rather than allow it to run unconsciously, shaped by fear, doubt, and the opinions of others. This is why spiritual awakening is, at its core, simply the process of remembering where your power has always lived, not in circumstances, not in other people's approval, not in luck or timing or external validation, in your own consciousness, in the quiet, sacred space where imagination and feeling meet, and from that meeting, reality itself is formed. Once you truly awaken to this, you can never again fully believe that you are simply a victim of circumstance, drifting at the mercy of a world that happens to you. You become instead a deliberate participant in your own unfolding, a co-creator working in harmony with a law that has never once failed, though it has often been misunderstood, ignored, or unconsciously misapplied. Feel this deeply now. To act as if you have everything is an act of profound spiritual maturity. It requires you to release your dependence on external proof before you allow yourself to feel inner conviction. It requires you to trust the unseen over the seen, the felt over the observed, the eternal over the temporary. This is precisely the kind of faith spoken of throughout every wisdom tradition, not blind faith, not naive faith, but faith rooted in a clear understanding of how consciousness actually operates. This faith says, I do not need to see it first because I understand that seeing follows believing, not the other way around. This faith says I can feel the fullness of my desire now because I know that feeling is the very substance from which outer form eventually crystallizes. You are not asked to abandon reason. You are asked to expand your understanding of what is actually reasonable. It is far more reasonable, once you understand the deeper mechanics of consciousness, to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled than to continue assuming lack, simply because lack is what currently appears before your physical senses. The senses were never meant to be the final authority on truth. They were meant to report on temporary conditions, conditions that themselves originated in a previous act of imagination, whether consciously chosen or absorbed unconsciously from family, culture, and early conditioning. You have the power right now to begin a new chain of causation, one rooted not in what has been, but in what you now choose to feel as true. This is your invitation then, not someday, not when conditions improve, but now, exactly as you are, exactly where you stand. Begin today to quietly practice living from the end. When you imagine your desire, do not imagine it as something you are working toward. Imagine it as something you are already living inside of. Speak internally as one who has already received. Feel internally as one who has already arrived. Walk through your ordinary day carrying the quiet, private knowing that regardless of what your eyes currently report, a deeper truth is already in motion, already assembling itself behind the scenes, already arranging the people, the circumstances, and the opportunities necessary to bring your inner conviction into full outer expression. Notice what happens when you carry yourself this way, even for a single day. Notice how your voice changes. Notice how your posture straightens, how your decisions shift, how you begin almost effortlessly to attract the very energy you have been embodying internally. This is not coincidence. This is law responding faithfully, as it always has and always will, to the state of consciousness you occupy most consistently. The world has never been unfair to you. The world has simply been mirroring with astonishing precision whatever you have believed about yourself and your possibilities, often long before you consciously realized you believed it at all. There is a quiet moment available to every person who commits to this inner practice when the outer world begins to feel almost secondary, almost like a delayed echo of something already settled within. This is the moment true embodiment begins. Not simply imagining the wish fulfilled for a few minutes and then returning to old habits of thought for the rest of the day, but carrying the felt reality of your desire with you into ordinary, unremarkable moments, into the grocery store, into the traffic light, into the quiet minutes before sleep, and the first waking breath of morning. This is where the real transformation takes root, not in the dramatic, isolated moments of visualization, but in the thousand small, unnoticed choices to remain faithful to the new identity rather than collapsing back into the old one. The instant appearances seem to contradict it. Understand this. Appearances will almost always seem to contradict the new state at first. This is not failure. This is simply the nature of a world still catching up to a shift that has already occurred internally. The seed does not look like the tree the moment it is planted. There is a season of darkness, of apparent nothing, before the first green shoot ever breaks the surface of the soil. Many people abandon their new assumption during this very season, mistaking the temporary absence of visible evidence for proof that the practice has failed. But the wise understand that this waiting period is not evidence against the law. It is simply evidence of the law working exactly as it always has, quietly, invisibly, beneath the surface before it ever breaks through into visible form. This is why patience is not a passive virtue in this work, but an active, disciplined act of faith. To remain faithful to your new identity during the season when nothing outward has yet changed is the truest test of whether you actually believe what you claim to believe. It is easy to feel wealthy for 5 minutes during a quiet meditation. It is a far deeper spiritual accomplishment to still feel wealthy 3 weeks later when the bank statement has not yet changed, and to feel it not through gritted teeth or forced positivity, but through calm, settled, unshakable inner knowing. This is the difference between wishing and assuming. Wishing hopes, assuming knows, and only assuming, sustained with quiet persistence, produces the outer transformation you seek. Consider this. Every person who has ever accomplished something remarkable in any field, at any point in history, passed through this same invisible season. The relationship, the breakthrough, the recognition, the healing, all of it existed first as a private, unseen conviction, held steady against every outer appearance that seemed to suggest otherwise. This is the hidden discipline behind every visible success story, rarely spoken of because it is far less glamorous than the final result. The world only sees the harvest. It rarely sees the long, quiet season of faithful tending that made the harvest possible. You must realize that your imagination is not a passive daydream, but an active living force. And every time you return to the feeling of your fulfilled desire, you strengthen the impression already being made upon your subconscious mind. Repetition, done with genuine feeling rather than mechanical routine, is what transforms a single moment of inspired imagining into a settled, permanent state of consciousness. This is why the practice must be revisited gently and without strain again and again, not out of anxious repetition born from doubt, but out of calm, joyful returning, the way a person might return again and again to a view they love simply because it brings them peace. Allow yourself to see this clearly. The goal is never to convince yourself of something you do not believe. The goal is to keep returning to the feeling until belief becomes unnecessary, because what was once an act of imagination has quietly become your actual lived identity. At that point, you are no longer performing an exercise. You have simply become the person for whom the desired experience is the natural, inevitable outer expression of who they already know themselves to be. And this, more than any single technique or affirmation, is the true meaning of acting as if you have everything. Not a trick played upon the mind, but a return to the truest, most expansive version of yourself, the version that was never actually lacking anything, only waiting patiently to be remembered, claimed, and lived from, one quiet, faithful moment at a time. Let this final truth settle deeply into your spirit now. You were never meant to spend your life waiting for permission from external circumstances to feel whole, to feel abundant, to feel loved, to feel successful. You were always meant to claim these states first within your own consciousness and allow the outer world to follow, as it always must, because it has no choice but to follow the lead of the one true creative power operating within you. This is not arrogance. This is remembering your true inheritance, an inheritance that was never based on merit or worthiness in the way the world defines those words, but simply on the fact that you were given from the very beginning the same creative imagination through which all things are made. Every scripture, every wisdom tradition, every mystic across every era who has ever tried to describe the deepest workings of reality has in one way or another pointed toward this same eternal truth. You become what you persistently imagine yourself to be and act as if you have everything, not because everything has already appeared in the world of the senses, but because everything already belongs to you in the timeless, boundless country of your own consciousness, and the world of appearances has no choice ultimately but to bow before what you have quietly, faithfully, and lovingly claimed as your own.